thought I was going to hit it. Yeah, I'd probably do it again. That totally blew my petrol budget. Hi, welcome to the video. So this is part 3 of my road trip across Australia from Sydney to Perth. So this is going to be the last 3 days that I spent in Western Australia, where I went from the WA South Australia border all the way to my sister's house in Perth. If you stick around to the end of the video, I'm going to do a special bit where I share with you what I felt were the highs and lows of this 9-day trip, and also just a few statistics for you: how long I drove each day, how far I drove each day, how much I spent on petrol. So stick around to the end for that. I'm going to pick you up right from when I woke up just the other side of the WA border and when I started traveling. I wanted to point out on the map for you, in case you're thinking of doing this, the different quarantine stations. So as you can see, the West Australian one is right on the border, but the South Australian one is just before you get to Ceduna. Time for us to stop for petrol and stretch our legs. I decided to pull over here just to show you what a typical rest stop looks like on when you're crossing the Nullarbor. So you'll see that little block, that little white building there is actually drop toilets. And then as we get further in, you can see that they have picnic benches, they have rubbish bins, yeah, trees. It's usually really great. You can see there's someone else camping there already. So yeah, great rest stops they have when you're crossing the Nullarbor. Show you on the map exactly how far we traveled. So this was the border. We stayed just before here and we went all the way here to Newman Rock, and this is where we camped. This whole area around here is a huge mining area, which means really long road trains. And here comes one now passing me. Let's catch up where we went today. This is where we camped last night, and this is Norseman, where we stopped for a shower, filled up our water, and we went through Coolgardie, the mining town, and we've camped in Southern Cross. Abby loves exploring the rocks. There we go again. Rock climbing. Let's get the bad stuff over with first. So not bad stuff, but what I felt were the lows of this trip. The number one thing was the cost of the petrol. Obviously I traveled at a most expensive time for petrol around the world, so it was over $2 a litre. This trip probably would have been cheaper if I had flown, but I wouldn't have been able to bring my dog and all my belongings and everything with me. So yeah, the cost of petrol was a bit of a downer for the trip. The second thing I found kind of like a low about the trip was that my hips were really sore at the end. It took a real toll on me physically. I spent 8 days driving out of 9, and that's a lot of sitting, and I'm used to walking around a lot, being mobile, lots of walks with Abby, and by the time I got to my sister's house, I was so stiff and sore in my hips, it took me days to recover. I also was just generally wiped out physically. I was surprised how exhausted I was, and when I got to the other end, I have a girlfriend who has done this trip from Sydney to Perth several times, and I phoned her up when I got to the other end. I said, can you tell me, I said, is this like giving birth? You forget about what it's like when you get to the other end, so you do it again? And she laughed and she goes, yeah, it's kind of like that, because once I got to Perth, I'm like, I'm never doing that again. But it's actually been 3 months since I did that trip, and I'm kind of like, yeah, I'd probably do it again. So yeah, it was totally exhausting by the time I got to the other end. Let's get to all the things I loved about the trip. The first thing was this feeling I had of freedom. It's just so much open, wide spaces and nobody around, and I don't know, it was so freeing. It was amazing just driving this trip. I don't know, just getting up every morning and driving, I don't know, I felt like I was in a movie, you know, like it was just so cool. And The second thing I loved about the trip was the beautiful scenery. Like, you're just for days and days and days staring at beautiful scenery. You're not going through major cities, and it's just, you just take, I took it for granted in the end. Once I got back into the city, I really missed it. But there's so much beautiful scenery, from the coastline just to the flat scrub plains, and then there's mountains and hills, and it was beautiful. The animals you see, it was really beautiful. It's a beautiful drive across Australia. The third thing that I loved about it is, for me, it's a huge accomplishment to have driven across Australia from Sydney to Perth all on my own, just with my dog. To me, it's a really big thing, and I've traveled all around the world on my own, but to do this whole thing 100% on my own, I think it's a pretty big achievement, and I'm very proud of myself. Which leads me on to the fourth thing that I found enjoyable about this trip, is that it's really increased my confidence. Now that I have done this trip, I feel like I can do anything. I feel like I can take on the world. It really does boost your confidence when you push yourself and you do something like this. The fifth thing that I loved about this trip is I felt really connected to nature. Like I said previously, you're not going through any major cities. You're spending so much time out in the open, out in the wilderness, and I felt really connected and at one with nature. It was such a peaceful feeling. That's a real bonus for this trip. You don't see towns or cities for so long. It's just really nice. And that brings me on to my last point, which is just the remoteness to civilization. I love being away from the noise of civilization. Civilization's really noisy. You don't realize it when you live in it all the time, but just being so remote from everything, I don't know, it just has a strange feeling, a really nice, awesome, positive feeling, really calming. Yeah, I loved that part of it. Let's get to some facts and statistics about this trip. First of all, on this trip, I drove a total of 3,950 kilometers for a total of 43 hours. I'm going to break that down for you. Day one, Camden to Dubbo, I drove 380 kilometers, and that was about 5 hours. Day two, Dubbo to Baden Park, 470 kilometers, again about another 5 hours. Day three, Baden Park to Peterborough, South Australia, 570 kilometers, and that was about 6 hours. Day four, Peterborough, South Australia to Minnepa, South Australia, 425 kilometers, and that was about 4.5 hours. Day five, rest day, the best day of the trip, rest day. Day six, Minnepa to just before the West Australian border, that was 625 kilometers and 7 hours. Day seven, the West Australian border to Newman Rocks, that was 600 kilometers and 6.25 hours. Day eight, Newman's Rocks to Southern Cross, Western Australia, 500 kilometers and 4.25 hours. And finally, day nine, Southern Cross to Perth, my sister's house, 380 kilometers and 4 hours. The total trip was 3,950 kilometers and 43 hours. I'm going to save the fuel price for last. There's a few interesting facts about this trip. I went through 2 quarantine stations, one in South Australia and one in Western Australia. I saw the following animals on my trip: goats, cows, emus, kangaroo, and I saw a wedge-tailed eagle. I have to tell you the story. I was driving, and if you've driven in Australia, you end up with a bit of roadkill. There was a kangaroo roadkill on the road, and I didn't know at the time, but there was a wedge-tailed eagle feeding on it. And as I got closer, it flew up literally right in front of my windscreen. I thought I was going to hit it, and that would have been the end of me. They're big. Anyway, it flew up, and it just managed to clear my van, and I didn't hit it. But I tell you what, that was a bit of a shock, and I've never been that close to an eagle, and they are big. They are huge. The other interesting facts, I had 2 showers in the 9 days. Kimba, which is the halfway point, and Norseman, which was in Western Australia. If I had to do this trip again, which I might do, I would do it differently. And to me, the ideal trip would be drive for 3 days, rest 1 day, drive for 3 days, rest 1 day, and then drive another 2 days. That to me, you wouldn't be so exhausted when you got to the other end. After my rest day on day 5, I had a lot of energy and I drove really hard and I burnt myself out a bit. So that would be my ideal way to do this trip. The final thing I've left you is how much did it cost me in petrol to drive from Sydney to Perth at the peak of petrol prices. And this was in May 2022, if you're watching this video another time. So the total price for my fuel was $850. That was in 9 days, so almost $100 a day. That was a lot. That was a lot of money. It totally blew my petrol budget, which I have made up since I've been here by not driving. But anyway, that's it. That's the wrap up for my road trip from Sydney to Perth in May 2022. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you enjoyed it, could you please give it a thumbs up, and I will see you on the next video. Take care.